All right. So this is kind of the last step for our final project. We want to publish the game in a way that we can share it with other people. And there's a lot of different ways you could do this. I'm going to go over one specific way, which is using a gaming website called itch.io. It's a publishing platform for indie games. There's other ways you could do it. You could make your own website. You could host it with GitHub Pages. There's lots of different ways that you could share your game with other people. But they all are going to involve a similar process. So we'll use Itch as an example, but you may, use a different. You may want to use a different service depending on what makes sense for your game. Outside of class, but in class we're all going to use Itch. So we've been building the game in P5, and P5 is a really good platform for writing code and testing the game, but it's not the best platform for publishing. It's not connected to any sort of like social media features or metrics or commenting system or anything else like that. So if you want to share the game with people, you could send them a link to your project on P5 and they can play the game, but that's pretty much where that interaction will end. And so using a platform like itch.io is a way that we can share the game in a public way where people can comment on it and share it and do other things like that. So to do this, we're going to start with our project in P5. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you have your project in a state that it's ready to be published. So you shouldn't have any errors. It should be starting on the splash page, and you should double check, make sure everything works. Once you export it, if you find a bug or you fix something, you'll have to go through this process again, which is fine. That's not the end of the world. You can repeat the process, but we want to make sure the game is in a relatively finished state before we publish it. So I'm going to start with the game where I had it at the end of last class. And as usual, I'll make a copy of this and I'll just rename this final version. So I'll call this game final. And so that way I just have the file named so I know that this is a final version. And I'll change the comment and say final version of my game, and the date is the December 9th. Most of the other stuff in here is going to stay the same, but there's a couple of things to watch out for. So for example, right now I have my game set to start at game state 2, and so if I run the game, it just starts in the middle of the game. But that's not what we would want from a published version. We would want it to start at game state 0, where we see the intro page. There's no way to change this after you've exported the game and published on itch.io. So double check for things like that. Or in some cases, another example of this is you might have changed the end state for testing. Let me refresh this for a second. So let's see, this would be in the game function. So in the game function, you may have a end state coded in. So I have it right here, reset the game when you get to the score is 20. And when you're testing, at some point you may have reset that to like 1 or 2 or something just to speed up the game so you can test stuff. So just make sure that anything that you've set like that for testing is set back to how it's intended to be set. So once you've got everything checked out and it looks good, we can download the game project. So to do this, we're going to go to File, and we just click on Download. And this is going to download an archive of your game with all of the files in it. So once we download that, we can go to the Finder and go to Downloads, and you'll see your game zip like this. And this is actually pretty much all we need. You can open this up and we'll take a look at what it looks like, but you can upload this directly to itch.io. And assuming that everything is set up correctly, it should work. But if we open this zip file, you'll see the files that are in there. It's all the files that we have in our sketch file. So it mirrors exactly what you created in the project. So you can see the audio files. You can see the P5 library is this p5.js file, and the P5 sound library is this file. So everything that is needed to run the game on its own is saved in this folder, which is really convenient for us because we can throw that on itch.io or another publishing site, and it'll work for us. So we can see all our sprites here and our UI. So we're going to upload this zip, and so we'll just leave that there, and we're going to go to itch.io. And this is just, as I mentioned, a indie game publishing website. We could probably find other games that are created with P5. So if we search for P5, you can see there's a bunch of games made with P5.js. So there's lots of different types of games made in P5. And so we can upload our own game. So you'll have to create an account here. You'll have to use an email to authenticate the account. You probably want to use your personal email. Of course, you can use your school email, but you'll want to use whatever email you have regular access to. Once you create an account, you can create a project. So you can go to Upload New Project. And it's a pretty straightforward process, but we'll just go through the steps. So you'll fill in the title of the game. So I forget what I called my game. Let's check my proposal, cat versus birds. So we'll call this cat versus birds. It'll generate a URL based on that. You can change it if you want to, but this is the URL where the game will be hosted. You can create a description. So I'll say you're a cat eating birds. And then you can change the classification. This is going to be a game, so we don't have to change this, but you can see the other types of things that are added on itch.io here, assets and other comics and other stuff. Then the kind of project we have to change. So we're going to change this from a downloadable project to a web-based project. So in here, just choose the HTML. And then when we share this with people, they'll be able to play it in the browser. For release status, it doesn't really matter what you put here. You could put in development, you could put release. Either way is fine. I'll put in development. For pricing, you can put no payments here. If you want to make it paid or donation based, you have to submit your credit card information. So we're not going to do that in class. If you think that you can sell the game, you could choose one of those options and set that up later. So then we're going to upload the game here. So it says here, upload a zip file containing your game. That's exactly what we downloaded from the P5 website. And it says there must be an index.html file in the zip. So it's going to look for the index.html to know where to load the game from. Your P5 project should have an index.html file by default. So as long as you didn't change that or rename it, it should work fine. So we'll go to upload files, and we'll just upload that zip that we downloaded from P5. I'll click open. And then we have to check this file would be played in the browser. So that will tell itch to load the file when the site is loaded. So then we have some embed options. And what we can do is match the window for the game to the size of the game. So double check what you put for the canvas size. So if we look in setup, we can see the canvas for my project is 480 by 360. So we just want to match that over here. So instead of 640, I'll do 480, and 360 stays the same. The rest of these options you can just ignore. And then any details that you want to add about the game, you can add here. So you could say, play my game, cat versus birds. And any other context or information you might want to add for a player, you can add in here. We can select the genre. So we could say this is an action game. Can see if there's any other genres that fit, but I think action is probably the closest. And then we can tag. So if you want to tag P5, you can tag it with P5. If you want to tag pixel art, if you use pixel art, if there's other things, maybe we could add cats and birds. You can add, as many tags as you want. There's an AI generation disclosure. So if you used AI, you can put yes here. If you did not, you can click no here. Either way is fine. And then for the community option, if you want people to be able to use comments, you can add comments here. If you don't want people to add comments, you can click disabled. And then finally, for visibility and access, for other people to be able to see the project, you have to set it to public. You can also create a restricted page with a password, but we can set it to public. Yeah, that's everything. So we can click save and view. And so when you load the game in itch.io, if you hit run game, it should load the game. And then if we click start, it'll focus the canvas. One of the reasons we do want to use the splash page with the mouse buttons is because if we don't actually have to click on the game, you're not going to focus the canvas. And so without the canvas focus, you won't be able to use the keyboard to control the character. So it's important to have some click mouse-based interaction to start the game, at least for itch.io, unless you want to program a workaround. Anyway, it seems like the game is working. Make sure to test the game. And also, another common mistake that people make is they forget to make their game public. So you can test that by copying the link to the game. In Chrome, open a new incognito window and then paste it in there. If the game loads, then you know it's public. If it says, there's no game here, that means you haven't made it public. So just double check that. You can also edit the theme of your game page if you want. So you can add, you can change the background color. Maybe we can make it match the color of our sky. You can change the text. You can change the font. You can make a pixel font if we want. So you could play around with the settings on the game page itself. And then one last thing that we want to make sure to have is a image for the game, a cover image that will show up in a list of the games if you submit it to a game jam or if you share it with somebody. So we'll use one of our images to create our cover image. You could also design a cover image separately if you want. I'm going to use, let's see. I'll use one of my backdrops. So I'll just throw that in there. I thought I could drag and drop it. Maybe I can't. Okay. So let's upload. So I'll use one of my backdrops. You could use, whatever you want here. And so we'll save that. And that's what will show up now if we look at the game page. It should show up behind the run game button. It may take a minute to update. Or actually, let me make sure I save this. Okay. It should appear behind the button, but it may take just a second to update. So that's the process. If you do go through that whole process and then you run the game and something doesn't work, you can always redo that process. So you would just go back to P5, you would fix whatever the bug is, and then download the file again, and then upload it again. When you upload it, I recommend deleting the original project first. It'll let you upload multiple versions of the project, but that's going to make it more complicated to manage. So I recommend just deleting the original file and then uploading a new file. So that's the whole process for creating the itch page for the final project. Next week when we present the final project, I'll make a little itch jam where we can all submit the projects, and so we can have a collection of all the games together. Okay, so that's the whole process, and then when you're done with that, you'll just submit the itch page as your final project, and that's what we'll look at the beginning of class next week. All right, any questions or anything you guys want to review on that process? Okay.